Detective Michael Chen had barely finished moving their belongings into their new apartment in the affluent suburbs of Silicon Valley when his daughter Olivia stepped through the imposing steel doors of Westbrook Academy. Old money and tech fortunes created an atmosphere of privilege that she could feel pressing down on her shoulders like a physical weight. She had no idea that by the end of the week, the entire school would witness a showdown in the cafeteria that would leave everyone speechless, or that her father's response would send shockwaves through Westbrook's pristine halls that would be remembered for years to come. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The gleaming hallways of Westbrook Academy stretched endlessly before her, their polished surfaces reflecting the morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. This was her fourth school in 3 years, each move prompted by her father's high-profile cases as one of California's most respected criminal investigators. But this time felt different. The bitter custody battle that had ended with her mother's move to Singapore had left Olivia raw, making this transition feel more like a last stand than just another fresh start. She glanced at her reflection in one of the windows, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, second-hand uniform that had seen better days. Around her, students in perfectly tailored blazers and designer shoes moved in tight-knit groups, their conversations dropping to whispers as she passed. Years of being the perpetual new girl had taught her to keep her chin up and her expression neutral, but she couldn't help noticing how her scuffed loafers and thrift store blazer seemed to broadcast her outsider status like a neon sign. The schedule in her hand led her to locker 2187. She had just started working the combination when a voice cut through the ambient chatter. "Hey, new girl!" Olivia turned to see a petite Asian girl with purple-streaked hair and bright eyes waving from beside a row of lockers. "I'm Maya. We have AP chemistry together first period." Relief flooded through Olivia as she offered a small smile. "I'm Olivia. Thanks for—" Before she could finish, Maya's eyes widened in alarm. She glanced over Olivia's shoulder, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Listen, you should probably know about—" The sharp click of heels on tile cut through the air like a knife. Olivia turned to see 3 figures approaching, their presence causing the hallway crowd to part like the Red Sea. At their center walked a tall girl with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expression of calculated superiority. Victoria Sterling, Olivia would soon learn, daughter of the CEO of Sterling Innovations, one of Silicon Valley's biggest tech companies. Flanking her were 2 boys in expensive Letterman jackets, Drake Matthews, star quarterback whose family name graced one of Westbrook's buildings, and Ethan Pierce, whose venture capitalist father had made headlines for his aggressive corporate takeovers. Victoria's cold gaze locked onto Olivia with predatory precision. "Well, well," she drawled, her voice carrying the practiced polish of old money. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn on their way to public school." Drake and Ethan snickered on cue, their expressions a mix of amusement and contempt. Victoria stepped closer, her designer perfume almost overwhelming at this distance. She reached out and fingered the fabric of Olivia's blazer, her perfectly manicured nails glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Goodwill's finest, I presume." Victoria's lips curled into a smirk. "You should know, Westbrook has standards. We're not some charity case school that takes in—" She paused, looking Olivia up and down. "Strays." Olivia felt her cheeks burn, but years of watching her father interrogate suspects had taught her the power of staying calm under pressure. She met Victoria's gaze steadily. "Funny. I thought prestigious schools valued intelligence over designer labels. My mistake." Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. She opened her mouth to respond, but the first period bell cut through the tension. Students began hurrying to class, the crowd dispersing like smoke in the wind. Victoria took a step back, her smile turning razor-sharp. "Welcome to Westbrook," she said sweetly, but her eyes promised trouble. "Hope you're a quick learner." With that, she turned on her heel and strode away, Drake and Ethan falling into step behind her like well-trained guard dogs. Olivia shut her locker, her heart rate slowly returning to normal. "Thanks for the heads up. I've dealt with mean girls before." "Not like Victoria," Maya said quietly. "She doesn't just bully people, she destroys them. Last year, a girl had to transfer schools after Victoria." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Just be careful, okay?" As they walked to chemistry together, Olivia's mind wandered to her father. Detective Michael Chen had built his career on taking down powerful criminals who thought they were untouchable. He'd taught her that true strength wasn't about intimidation or cruelty. It was about standing your ground and fighting for what's right. Little did Victoria know, she'd just picked a fight with the wrong girl. Because while Olivia might look like an easy target in her secondhand uniform, she was her father's daughter through and through. And Detective Chen hadn't raised her to back down from bullies, no matter how rich or powerful they might be. By lunchtime, Olivia had already mapped out Westbrook Academy's intricate social hierarchy. The cafeteria was like a perfectly orchestrated display of teenage aristocracy, with Victoria Sterling's table positioned prominently in the center of the room, a modern-day throne for Silicon Valley's princess. The large circular table, unofficially reserved for Victoria and her inner circle, sat atop a slightly raised platform that gave them a perfect vantage point to survey their domain. Olivia stood at the entrance, tray in hand, taking in the scene. Victoria held court with practiced ease, her laptop open beside her untouched salad, as she scrolled through what appeared to be social media posts. Drake Matthews and Ethan Pierce flanked her like prestigious bookends, while a rotating cast of wannabes hovered nearby, hoping to catch a crumb of attention from their self-appointed queen. "Over here!" Maya's voice cut through Olivia's observations. She turned to see her new friend waving from a table near the large windows, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar. As Olivia made her way over, she noticed other students quickly averting their eyes as if afraid to be caught looking at her for too long. "So," Maya said as Olivia sat down, "how's your first day going?" Before Olivia could answer, another girl dropped into the seat beside them. She had warm brown skin and wore a hijab in Westbrook's colors, her expression friendly but cautious. "This is Zara," Maya introduced. "She's our resident computer genius and the only reason I'm passing AP Computer Science." "Nice to meet you," Zara said, her voice carrying a slight British accent. "I saw what happened this morning with Victoria. Pretty brave of you to stand up to her like that." Olivia shrugged, poking at her overpriced cafeteria pasta. "Not brave, just tired of people like her thinking they own the world." "They kind of do, though," Zara replied, lowering her voice. "At least here at Westbrook. Victoria's father isn't just rich. He's powerful. The kind of powerful that makes problems disappear." Maya nodded, glancing around before leaning in. "Remember Ashley Collins from last year? She was class president, straight-A student, had early admission to Stanford. Then she questioned some of Victoria's creative interpretations of the student council budget." "What happened?" Olivia asked, though she had a feeling she knew where this was going. "Victoria started small," Zara continued. "First, rumors about Ashley cheating on tests. Then, mysteriously, Ashley's college admission was rescinded. Something about inconsistencies in her application. Her family moved away before the semester ended." "That's not even the worst part," Maya added. 2 weeks later, Ashley's dad lost his job at a tech startup. Apparently, Sterling Innovations acquired the company and immediately restructured the management team. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine, but years of listening to her father's cases had taught her to look deeper. "So Victoria doesn't just bully people, she destroys their families too." "Only when they really get in her way," Zara said. "Usually she's more subtle." As if on cue, a commotion erupted from the center of the cafeteria. A freshman boy had apparently bumped into Drake, causing him to spill his drink. The boy was apologizing profusely, but Drake's expression had already twisted into something ugly. "You know what that jacket cost?" Drake growled, standing to his full height. The boy, whose name tag identified him as a scholarship student, paled visibly. I'm sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. With what money? Victoria interjected, her voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. Isn't that why you're here on charity? Because your family can't afford proper education? The boy's face flushed red as snickers rippled through the crowd. Ethan stood up, cracking his knuckles with theatrical menace. Maybe we should teach him about respect. Is there a problem here? A new voice cut through the tension. Olivia turned to see a tall boy with dark skin and striking green eyes approaching the scene. According to Maya's hurried whisper, this was Alex Rivera, star of the basketball team, and one of the few students who'd ever challenged Victoria's authority. Nothing that concerns you, Rivera, Drake spat. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in his voice. Alex stepped between Drake and the freshman, his presence somehow both casual and commanding. Kid bumped you, he apologized. Unless you want Coach Martinez to hear about you threatening scholarship students again? Drake's face darkened at the mention of the coach, but Victoria's laugh diffused the situation before it could escalate. Come on, Drake, he's not worth it. Besides, she added, her gaze sweeping the cafeteria and landing squarely on Olivia, we have more interesting things to discuss. The freshman scurried away, but Victoria's words hung in the air like smoke. She pulled out her phone, manicured fingers tapping away as she spoke, just loud enough to carry. Did you know Daddy Dearest's last case in San Francisco ended interestingly? Something about evidence disappearing and charges being dropped? Olivia's blood ran cold. She knew exactly which case Victoria was referring to. A high-profile corruption investigation that had ended abruptly 3 months ago. Her father had been unusually quiet about it, but she'd overheard enough late-night phone calls to know it had hit him hard. It's amazing what you can find with the right connections, Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Like father, like daughter, I suppose. Both trying to play in leagues they don't belong in. Maya grabbed Olivia's arm as she started to rise. Don't, she whispered. That's exactly what she wants. Olivia forced herself to stay seated, but her mind was racing. Victoria hadn't just done a casual internet search. She'd dug deep, probably using her father's connections to access information that wasn't public. This wasn't just typical high school bullying, this was calculated intimidation. As the lunch period ended and students began filing out, Victoria made a point of walking past their table. Oh, and Olivia, she called over her shoulder. Tell your father I said hi. My dad mentioned he might be hearing from him soon. The threat was clear, and for the first time Olivia felt a flutter of real fear. Not for herself, but for her father. Victoria Sterling wasn't just another mean girl with designer clothes and daddy's credit card. She was someone who'd learned from the best how to wield power like a weapon. You okay? Zara asked as they gathered their things. Olivia nodded, but her jaw was set in a determined line. Her father had taught her that bullies, whether they wore street clothes or designer labels, all had one thing in common. They counted on their targets staying quiet and afraid. But Detective Chen's daughter wasn't about to give Victoria that satisfaction. As they left the cafeteria, Olivia caught Alex Rivera watching her with an unreadable expression. He gave her a slight nod before disappearing into the crowd, leaving her to wonder if she'd just found another ally, or if she was already in deeper than she realized. The next few days at Westbrook Academy felt like walking through a minefield. Victoria's initial threat about Olivia's father had been just the beginning. What started as whispers in the hallway quickly evolved into a sophisticated campaign of isolation and intimidation. During AP Chemistry, Olivia's assigned lab partner suddenly refused to work with her, claiming a mysterious allergy to something Olivia had obviously brought from public school. In computer science, her login mysteriously malfunctioned, deleting an important assignment minutes before it was due. Even Maya and Zara began receiving warnings from other students to distance themselves from the detective's daughter if they knew what was good for them. Just ignore them, Maya insisted during lunch, though Olivia noticed she'd started looking over her shoulder more frequently. They can't keep this up forever. But Victoria could, and did. Each move was calculated, just subtle enough to avoid direct intervention from teachers. When Olivia opened her locker Wednesday morning, a newspaper clipping floated out. An article about her father's failed San Francisco case, with certain phrases highlighted in neon yellow. Evidence compromised. Charges dropped. Investigation ongoing. Interesting reading material, Victoria commented as she passed by, Drake and Ethan snickering behind her. There's more where that came from. My father's legal team is very thorough. Olivia's hand shook as she crumpled the article, but she kept her voice steady. Is this supposed to scare me? Victoria's perfectly glossed lips curved into a predatory smile. Oh, honey, this is just me being friendly. You really don't want to see me when I'm not. The threat might have worked on someone else, but Olivia had grown up watching her father build cases against some of California's most dangerous criminals. She knew intimidation when she saw it, and she knew how to fight back. That afternoon, she stayed late after school, using the computer lab to do some research of her own. Her father had taught her how to access public records, and Victoria's family had plenty of those. Sterling Innovations had its share of SEC investigations, though nothing had ever stuck. More interesting were the patents filed under subsidiaries, several of which looked suspiciously similar to technologies developed by smaller companies that had mysteriously gone bankrupt shortly after. You shouldn't be looking at that. Olivia jumped at Alex Rivera's voice. She hadn't heard him enter the lab. He glanced at her screen, his expression grim. Victoria's got the school's network monitored. Any search about Sterling Innovations gets flagged. How do you know that? Alex's green eyes darkened. Because last year my cousin worked for a startup that Sterling destroyed. He tried to fight back, expose some questionable practices. Next thing we knew, he was facing criminal charges for corporate espionage. Had to flee to Mexico. Olivia quickly closed the browser, but her mind was racing. So everyone just lets them get away with it? No one fights back? People try, Alex said, leaning against a desk. But Victoria learned from the best. Her father doesn't just crush competition, he erases it. And she's following in his footsteps. Before Olivia could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number containing a video link. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. It was security footage from outside their apartment building, showing her father returning home late at night, looking exhausted. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. Another text followed. Daddy works such long hours? Sure would be a shame if something happened while he was away. They're watching my house, Olivia whispered, showing Alex the messages. His jaw tightened. Victoria's escalating. Usually takes her weeks to get to physical threats. I must be special, Olivia said dryly, but her heart was pounding. This wasn't just about her anymore. That evening, Olivia sat at her kitchen table picking at her dinner, the threats weighing heavily on her mind. Her father noticed her unusual quietness but didn't push. He'd been working late more often, dealing with a new case that kept him glued to his phone. Everything okay at school? He asked casually. Though his detective's instincts were clearly on alert, Olivia forced a smile. Just adjusting. She couldn't tell him about Victoria's threats, not when he was already dealing with so much. Besides, Detective Chen had taught her to gather evidence before making accusations, and that's exactly what she planned to do. What Victoria didn't know was that she wasn't dealing with some ordinary new girl. She was dealing with someone who'd grown up learning how to think like an investigator. And if Victoria Sterling wanted to play games, she was about to learn that Detective Chen's daughter knew how to play them too. As Olivia lay in bed that night, her phone buzzed one final time. Another message from the unknown number. Sweet dreams, detective's daughter. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Victoria was right about one thing. Tomorrow would definitely be interesting, but not in the way she expected. Thursday dawned with an air of inevitable confrontation. The morning passed in a blur of tense glances and whispered conversations until lunch period arrived. Olivia sat with Maya and Zara at their usual table, trying to ignore the weight of Victoria's stares from across the cafeteria. Something's off, Zara murmured, noting the unusual quiet that had settled over the room. Victoria's crew keeps checking their phones and smirking. Maya shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should eat somewhere else today. Before Olivia could respond, Victoria stood up, commanding attention without saying a word. She walked to the center of the cafeteria, Drake and Ethan following like well-trained attack dogs. The room fell silent as she pulled out her phone. "You know," Victoria announced, her voice carrying across the cafeteria, "I've always believed in honesty, and I think our dear classmates deserve to know the truth about their new friend, Olivia Chen." Olivia's stomach dropped as Victoria held up her phone, showing a professionally edited video playing on the screen. Security footage from multiple angles showed Detective Chen entering an evidence room in San Francisco, then leaving with a small package. The footage was edited to look suspicious, with ominous music playing in the background. Seems Detective Chen had a habit of making evidence disappear, Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false concern. But that's not even the best part. The video changed to show bank statements, doctored, Olivia knew instantly, suggesting regular deposits to an offshore account in her father's name. Victoria had somehow gotten access to confidential case files and twisted them into something sinister. "Your father isn't just a failed detective," Victoria sneered. "He's a corrupt cop who took bribes to sink his own cases, and now he's here probably doing the same thing. Like father, like daughter, right?" The cafeteria erupted in whispers. Olivia stood slowly, her hands trembling not with fear but with rage. "You're liking..." "Am I?" Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "The evidence speaks for itself. Your father's a dirty cop, and you're just as pathetic as he is." Something in Olivia snapped. Years of moving schools, of staying quiet, of taking the high road, it all crystallized into a single moment of pure fury. "The only pathetic person here is you, Victoria. Using Daddy's money and connections to bully people because you have nothing else to offer?" Victoria's perfectly composed mask slipped for a moment, showing genuine anger. "Excuse me? You heard me?" Olivia stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. "I've dealt with real criminals, people who actually had power. You? You're just a scared little girl playing with Daddy's toys." The cafeteria fell dead silent. Victoria's face contorted with rage. "Drake, show this little detective's brat what happens when she doesn't know her place." Drake stepped forward, cracking his knuckles theatrically, but before he could move, Alex Rivera appeared between them. "Back off, Matthews." "Stay out of this, Rivera," Drake growled, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Make me," Alex replied calmly. Drake lunged forward, but Alex was faster. He sidestepped the attack, causing Drake to stumble. The crowd gasped as Drake crashed into a table, sending trays flying. Victoria screamed in frustration. "Ethan, do something!" Ethan moved to grab Olivia, but years of self-defense training with her father kicked in. She ducked under his grasp, using his momentum to send him sprawling. Victoria, seeing her enforcers neutralized, grabbed a bowl of soup from a nearby table and hurled it at Olivia. Olivia managed to dodge most of it, but the hot liquid splashed across her arm. The pain only fueled her determination. She stood tall, facing Victoria directly. "Is this all you've got?" Olivia challenged. "Fake videos and playground tactics? No wonder your father has to buy your way through life." Victoria's carefully maintained composure shattered completely. With a shriek of rage, she launched herself at Olivia, designer heels clicking on the cafeteria floor. But before she could reach her target, a commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" The cafeteria fell silent as Principal Hammond stormed in, followed by several teachers. But it was the figure behind them that made Victoria freeze mid-step. Detective Michael Chen stood in the doorway, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the scene before him. His presence seemed to fill the entire room, and even Victoria took an involuntary step back. The principal began shouting about detention and suspension, but Olivia barely heard her. She was watching her father, whose eyes had locked onto the phone still displaying the doctored video in Victoria's hand. "Miss Sterling," Detective Chen said, his voice quiet but carrying an authority that made everyone flinch. "I believe we need to have a conversation. You, me, your father, and the FBI's cybercrime division. Now. Victoria's face went pale. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. The cafeteria remained frozen, all eyes darting between Detective Chen and Victoria Sterling, as the power dynamic that had defined Westbrook Academy for years shifted dramatically in a single moment. The principal's office had never felt smaller than it did now. Detective Michael Chen stood by the window, his badge and gun visible on his belt, while Principal Hammond sat behind her desk, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Victoria Sterling sat alone in one of the chairs, her earlier bravado replaced by nervous fidgeting as they waited for her father to arrive. Olivia watched from her seat as her father remained perfectly still, his stance reminiscent of the countless interrogations he'd conducted over the years. The silence was deafening, broken only by the tap-tap-tap of Victoria's expensive heel against the carpet. The door burst open as Richard Sterling swept in, his tailored suit and commanding presence filling the room. "What is the meaning of this? I was in the middle of a board meeting." Mr. Sterling, Detective Chen interrupted, his voice calm but stern. "Thank you for joining us. We have some matters to discuss regarding your daughter's recent activities." Richard Sterling's expression shifted from annoyance to calculated neutrality. "Whatever minor school dispute this is about?" "This isn't about a school dispute," Detective Chen cut in again, pulling out his phone. "This is about cybercrime, harassment, and the illegal access of confidential police files." He played the doctored video Victoria had shown in the cafeteria. "Would you care to explain how your daughter obtained this footage, Mr. Sterling? Or should I ask your company's cybersecurity team?" Victoria's father's face darkened. "I don't appreciate accusations." "And I don't appreciate my daughter being threatened," Detective Chen replied, his voice taking on an edge that made everyone in the room tense. "Or having my cases tampered with. The FBI is very interested in how confidential police files ended up in your daughter's possession." Principal Hammond cleared her throat. "Perhaps we could handle this internally." "This stopped being an internal matter," Detective Chen stated, "when Miss Sterling here decided to access government databases and create false evidence. That's a federal offense." Victoria's composure cracked. "Daddy, I didn't—" "Be quiet, Victoria," her father snapped, before turning to Detective Chen. "Surely we can come to some arrangement, like the arrangement you made in San Francisco?" Detective Chen's eyes narrowed. "When evidence against Sterling Innovations mysteriously disappeared? Yes, I've been looking into that too. Fascinating how many connections lead back to your company." The color drained from Richard Sterling's face. "You can't prove anything." "Actually," Detective Chen smiled slightly, pulling out a small USB drive. "I can." "You see, Mr. Sterling, while your daughter was busy threatening mine, she didn't realize something important. I wasn't just transferred here by chance. I've been building a case against your company's illegal activities for months. Victoria's actions just gave me probable cause for a deeper investigation." Victoria looked at her father in panic. "Dad?" Richard Sterling's businessman facade crumbled slightly. "What do you want?" "First," Detective Chen said, counting off on his fingers, "your daughter will face consequences for her actions. No expulsion. I'm not interested in destroying her future the way she tried to destroy others. But she will participate in an anti-bullying program I help run with the department, working with kids who've been victims of cyberbullying." He continued before anyone could interrupt. "Second, Sterling Innovations will face a full audit of its cybersecurity practices, cooperating fully with federal investigators. Third, you will personally ensure that every student or family your daughter has harmed receives proper restitution." "And if I refuse?" Sterling challenged, though his voice lacked conviction. Detective Chen's expression hardened. "Then tomorrow morning the FBI Cybercrime Division receives everything on this drive. Your choice." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Finally, Richard Sterling nodded curtly. "Victoria," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger, Apologize to Miss Chen. Now. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. But Dad, now, Victoria, before you cost this family everything? Victoria turned to Olivia, her face a mix of humiliation and defeat. I'm sorry, she managed through gritted teeth. Not just to me, Olivia spoke for the first time since entering the office. To everyone you've hurt. Maya, Zara, that freshman you terrorized, Alex's cousin, Ashley Collins, everyone. Principal Hammond nodded vigorously. Yes, a full school assembly where Victoria can publicly apologize and admit to everything she's done, Detective Chen added. Complete transparency. Richard Sterling looked like he'd swallowed something bitter, but he nodded. It will be done. Victoria will make this right. He turned to his daughter. Won't you? Victoria, her perfectly crafted world crumbling around her, could only nod. As the Sterlings left the office, Detective Chen finally turned to his daughter. The stern investigator facade melted away, replaced by concern. You okay, kiddo? Olivia felt tears welling up but fought them back. Why didn't you tell me you were investigating them? Couldn't risk it, he said softly. But I've been watching. The moment Victoria started threatening you, I knew it was time to move. He pulled her into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you for standing up to her. You're stronger than you know. Principal Hammond awkwardly cleared her throat. Detective Chen, about the cafeteria incident. My daughter defended herself against physical assault, he stated firmly. The security cameras will confirm that. I trust that won't be an issue. The principal quickly shook her head. As they left the office together, Olivia saw Maya and Zara waiting anxiously in the hallway. Alex stood nearby, trying to look casual but clearly concerned. For the first time since arriving at Westbrook, Olivia felt truly seen. Not as the new girl, not as the detective's daughter, but as herself. Come on, her father said, noting her friends' worried faces. I think your friends deserve to know what happened, and maybe we can all grab some real food. That cafeteria soup looked terrible anyway. Olivia couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the past few days finally breaking. Victoria Sterling's reign of terror was over, and a new chapter at Westbrook was about to begin. The next morning, Westbrook Academy's pristine auditorium was packed to capacity. The usual morning chatter was replaced by an expectant hush as students filed in, all aware that something unprecedented was about to happen. Principal Hammond had called a mandatory assembly, and rumors about the Sterling family had been circulating wildly since the cafeteria incident. Olivia sat between Maya and Zara in the middle section, feeling the weight of dozens of stares. Alex sat directly behind them, his presence offering silent support. Near the front, Victoria Sterling sat alone, her usual entourage notably absent. Even Drake and Ethan had distanced themselves, choosing seats on the opposite side of the auditorium. Principal Hammond approached the podium, clearing her throat. Students of Westbrook Academy, we're here this morning to address some serious issues concerning student conduct and abuse of power within our community. She paused, adjusting her glasses. Miss Sterling has something she would like to say to you all. Victoria rose slowly, her designer clothes impeccable as always, but her usual confident strut was missing as she walked to the podium. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded a piece of paper. Over the past 2 years, she began, her voice lacking its usual arrogance, I have engaged in systematic bullying and intimidation of my fellow students. The admission sent whispers rippling through the crowd. I used my family's resources to access private information, spread malicious rumors, and threaten students and their families. From his position at the back of the auditorium, Detective Chen watched with arms crossed, ensuring the terms of their agreement were being met. Next to him stood an FBI agent, her badge visible on her belt. Victoria continued, her voice growing unsteady. I want to apologize to specific people who were hurt by my actions. She looked up, scanning the crowd. To Ashley Collins and her family, who were forced to leave Westbrook because I couldn't handle being challenged. To Maya Chen and Zara Hassan, who I tried to intimidate just for being friends with someone I targeted. The list went on, each name adding to the weight of Victoria's crimes. Some students gasped as they learned the full extent of her manipulation. Others sat in stunned silence, realizing how much pain had been inflicted in their midst. And to Olivia Chen, Victoria's voice cracked slightly, I apologize for threatening you and your father, for accessing confidential files, and for trying to destroy your reputation before you even had a chance here. Principal Hammond stepped forward again. As a result of these actions, there will be changes at Westbrook Academy. The student council will be restructured with new oversight measures in place. Additionally, we're implementing a peer accountability program, which Miss Sterling will be required to participate in as part of her rehabilitation. The FBI agent moved to the podium next. Furthermore, the FBI's Cybercrime Division will be conducting workshops here at Westbrook, teaching students about the serious legal consequences of cyberbullying and unauthorized access of government databases. As the assembly continued, Olivia noticed something shifting in the atmosphere. Students who had once avoided eye contact were now offering small smiles. A few even mouthed thank you when they caught her eye. The invisible walls that had divided the student body were crumbling. After the assembly, Victoria tried to hurry out, but found her path blocked by a group of students, past victims finding their voice. Is it true you got my brother's college acceptance revoked? One girl demanded. Did you really hack into the school system to change grades? Another asked. Victoria looked overwhelmed, her carefully constructed world of privilege and power dissolving around her. For the first time, she was facing the real consequences of her actions, not just from authority figures, but from her peers. Detective Chen appeared beside Olivia as she watched the scene unfold. You okay with all this? He asked quietly. Olivia nodded. It's not about revenge. It's about accountability. That's my girl, he smiled proudly. You know, watching you stand up to them, you reminded me of why I became a detective in the first place. Sometimes the biggest crimes aren't committed with guns or violence, but with privilege and power. Alex approached them, looking somewhat hesitant. Detective Chen? I think there are some other students who might have information about similar incidents at other schools, cases where Sterling Innovations was involved. The detective handed Alex his card. My door's always open. Justice doesn't have an expiration date. As they left the auditorium, Olivia caught one last glimpse of Victoria, standing alone for perhaps the first time in her life. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Olivia saw something she never expected. Genuine remorse. Maya linked her arm through Olivia's as they walked to class. So, think things will be different now? Olivia looked around at the changing dynamics of Westbrook Academy, students from different social circles mixing freely, former victims standing tall, even some of Victoria's old followers looking relieved to be freed from her influence. Yeah, she said with a small smile. I think they will be. Sometimes it takes one person standing up to show others they can too. Zara joined them, grinning. Well, they definitely messed with the wrong girl. The wrong family, Olivia corrected, watching her father chat with the FBI agent down the hall. They messed with the wrong family. The week following Victoria's public confession brought an uneasy peace to Westbrook Academy. The halls felt different, as if the school was collectively holding its breath, waiting to see if the changes would last. Victoria had been suspended for 3 days, and her return was scheduled for Monday morning. During her absence, the social landscape shifted dramatically. Drake and Ethan, stripped of their enforcer status, retreated to the relative safety of the athletic crowd. Former members of Victoria's inner circle scrambled to realign themselves, some even approaching Olivia, with awkward attempts at friendship. It's weird, Maya commented during lunch on Friday. People who wouldn't even look at us last week are suddenly acting like we're their best friends. Zara nodded, picking at her salad. Yesterday, Jessica Porter, you know, Victoria's former second-in-command, asked if I wanted to join her study group, the same study group that rejected me last semester for not being the right fit. Olivia watched the social reshuffling with Detective's daughter's skepticism. People are adapting to the new power dynamic. Old alliances are breaking down. Speaking of alliances, Maya nudged her, nodding toward the cafeteria entrance where Alex Rivera had just walked in. He caught Olivia's eye and headed their way. "Hey," he said, sliding into an empty seat. "Just thought you should know. There's talk about Victoria's return on Monday. Some of her die-hard supporters are planning something." Olivia straightened. "What kind of something?" "Not sure exactly." Alex lowered his voice. "But I overheard Drake and Ethan in the locker room. They're feeling humiliated about how everything went down. They're saying Victoria's family might have backed down, but they don't have to. They're not smart enough to plan anything on their own," Zara pointed out. "They've always just followed Victoria's orders." "Maybe," Alex agreed, "but wounded pride makes people do stupid things." The conversation was interrupted by Principal Hammond's voice over the intercom, announcing a new peer accountability initiative. Starting Monday, all students would participate in weekly discussion groups led by counselors and local law enforcement officers, including Detective Chen. "Your dad's really going all in on this, huh?" Maya said to Olivia. "He believes in systemic change," Olivia replied. "It's not enough to stop one bully if the culture that created them stays the same." After school, Olivia found a note tucked into her locker. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Can we talk? Alone. V." She showed the note to Alex, who frowned. "Could be a trap." "Victoria's not that stupid," Olivia said. "She knows she's being watched. Besides, I don't think she's the real threat anymore." She was right. She found Victoria waiting in the empty art room, looking smaller somehow without her usual designer armor. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her face bare of makeup. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Victoria said quietly. "Almost didn't," Olivia replied, keeping her distance. "What do you want?" Victoria twisted her hands together. "To warn you. Drake and Ethan, they're not handling this well. They blame you for everything, their suspension, their family's embarrassment, the fact that colleges are rescinding their early admissions. And you're telling me this because I created them," Victoria's voice cracked. "I turned them into what they are. I taught them that power means never backing down, that humiliation demands revenge. And now I'm afraid of what they might do." Olivia studied her former tormentor carefully. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have nothing left to gain," Victoria answered simply. "My father's under federal investigation. Our family's reputation is ruined. The only thing I can do now is try to prevent anyone else from getting hurt because of me." Before Olivia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Need you home ASAP. Important." At home, Detective Chen was waiting with troubling news. "We intercepted some concerning communications," he said, spreading photos across the kitchen table. They showed Drake and Ethan meeting with known members of a local gang. "Looks like they're trying to hire some muscle to handle their problem." Olivia told him about Victoria's warning. Her father nodded grimly. "She came to the station this afternoon, gave a full statement about everything, including things we didn't know about. She's cooperating fully." "You think she's really changed?" "People can surprise you," he said thoughtfully. "Sometimes hitting rock bottom is the wake-up call they need. But right now we need to focus on Drake and Ethan. They're the wild cards." "What's the plan?" "We'll have plainclothes officers watching the school. But I need you to stay alert. No walking home alone, no isolated confrontations." Olivia thought about Alex, Maya, and Zara, how they'd stood by her through everything. "I'm not alone, Dad. I've got people watching my back." Detective Chen smiled. "Yes, you do. And so do I." The FBI is very interested in who Drake and Ethan are meeting with. These gang connections might help us crack some bigger cases. As they discussed security measures, Olivia realized that while one chapter of the story might be ending, another was just beginning. Victoria Sterling's reign of terror was over, but the aftermath was creating new threats and unexpected allies. Monday's return to school would be more than just another day. It would be a test of whether Westbrook Academy had truly changed, and whether those who had lost their power would accept their fall from grace. Monday morning arrived with an electric tension in the air. Victoria's return to school coincided with the start of the new peer accountability program, and the halls of Westbrook Academy buzzed with nervous energy. Olivia arrived early, accompanied by Alex, who had insisted on picking her up despite her father's unmarked police car following them at a discreet distance. The first sign of trouble came during morning assembly. Principal Hammond was introducing the peer counseling schedule when Drake and Ethan slipped in through the side door, their expressions dark and determined. They took seats near the exit, exchanging glances that made Olivia's investigator instincts flare up. "Something's not right," she whispered to Alex. "They look too confident." Maya leaned in from Olivia's other side. "3 guys I've never seen before were hanging around the parking lot when I arrived. They didn't look like students." Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Gang unit spotted known troublemakers near campus. Stay alert." The assembly ended, and students began filing out to their first classes. Olivia stayed close to her friends, watching Drake and Ethan disappear down the hallway with purposeful strides. Victoria, who had been sitting alone in the back, caught Olivia's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the exit. Following her instinct, Olivia checked her phone's tracking app, something her father had insisted on installing. The unmarked police car was still in position, but had moved to the back of the school. That's when she heard it, the distinct sound of a scuffle coming from the direction of the student parking lot. "Alex," she grabbed his arm. "The parking lot. They're trying to draw attention to the wrong place." They rushed to the window overlooking the lot, where 2 of the suspicious men Maya had spotted were engaged in what looked like a staged fight. Teachers and security guards were rushing to break it up, leaving other areas of the school vulnerable. "It's a diversion," Alex realized. But for what? Olivia's mind raced, putting the pieces together like her father had taught her. The evidence. Drake and Ethan know Victoria gave statements to the police. They'll want to destroy anything else she might have. "Victoria's laptop," Zara gasped. "She keeps everything on it. She was bragging about having dirt on everyone just last week." Without waiting for confirmation, Olivia took off toward the computer lab where Victoria usually worked during first period. Alex and Maya followed close behind, while Zara split off to alert security. They found the lab door locked, but through the window they could see Drake and Ethan cornering Victoria near the back of the room. A third man, older, with gang tattoos visible on his neck, was trying to access her laptop. "Give us the password," Drake was saying, his voice muffled through the glass. "And this doesn't have to get messy." Victoria, despite looking terrified, stood her ground. "It's over, Drake. I'm not helping you hurt anyone else." Ethan grabbed her arm roughly. "You don't get to grow a conscience now. Not after everything we did for you." "Alex," Olivia whispered urgently. "The ventilation shaft. It connects to the janitor's closet next door. My father's team needs time to get here." Understanding dawned in his eyes, while Maya used her phone to silently film what was happening, gathering evidence just as Olivia had taught her. Alex and Olivia raced to the closet. The ceiling panel moved easily, and Olivia thanked her father's insistence on knowing every building's layout for emergency situations. Inside the lab, the situation was escalating. The gang member was getting frustrated with the laptop's encryption, and Drake's patience was wearing thin. "Last chance, Victoria," he growled. "Give us what we need or we'll take it. And maybe send a message to the detective's daughter while we're at it." That's when Olivia dropped from the ceiling panel, landing behind them with practiced precision. Alex followed, immediately putting himself between Victoria and her attackers. "The only message being sent," Olivia said clearly, her phone broadcasting everything to her father's team, "is how far you've fallen." Drake spun around, his face contorting with rage. "You!" The gang member pulled out a knife, but Olivia remained calm. "You really want to add armed assault to your charges? The FBI is already investigating your gang connections. How much deeper do you want to dig this hole?" "You're bluffing," Ethan said, but his voice wavered. Am I? Olivia nodded toward the window, where Maya's phone was clearly visible, recording everything. The police are already on their way. Your diversion in the parking lot? Pretty obvious to someone who grew up learning about criminal tactics. As if on cue, sirens became audible in the distance. The gang member cursed, clearly realizing he'd been set up, and made a dash for the door, only to run straight into Detective Chen and 2 FBI agents. Drake and Ethan's bravado crumbled as they were arrested, their carefully planned revenge falling apart in minutes. Victoria, still shaking, looked at Olivia with a mixture of gratitude and shame. I tried to warn you about them, she said quietly. You did, Olivia acknowledged. That's a start. As the authorities led Drake and Ethan away in handcuffs, Detective Chen pulled his daughter aside. That was risky, he said, though pride tinged his voice. But well executed. You recognized the diversion tactic? Learned from the best. She smiled. Besides, I had backup. She nodded toward her friends, who were giving statements to the FBI agents. The incident marked a true end to the old power structure at Westbrook Academy. Drake and Ethan's arrest, combined with the evidence of their gang connections, ensured they wouldn't be returning to school. More importantly, it showed everyone that the days of intimidation and fear were over. News of Drake and Ethan's arrest spread through Westbrook Academy like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone had seen the video Maya had recorded, which had been turned over to the authorities as evidence. The cafeteria buzzed with excited chatter as students gathered in mixed groups, the old social barriers continuing to crumble in the wake of the morning's events. Principal Hammond called an emergency assembly to address the situation. The student body filed into the auditorium, but this time the atmosphere was different. There was no fear, no tension, just a shared sense of witnessing the end of an era. Today's events, Principal Hammond began, her voice steady, while disturbing, have shown us the importance of the changes we're implementing at Westbrook. The involvement of gang members on our campus is a serious matter, but thanks to the quick thinking of several students and the intervention of law enforcement, a potentially dangerous situation was averted. Detective Chen stood at the back of the auditorium with the FBI agents, watching as his daughter sat among her friends. The pride in his eyes was unmistakable. Moving forward, the principal continued, we will be accelerating our peer accountability program. Detective Chen has agreed to lead additional workshops on recognizing and reporting criminal behavior, and the FBI will be conducting a thorough review of our school security protocols. Victoria raised her hand, surprising everyone. When Principal Hammond nodded, she walked to the podium, her movements lacking their former arrogance. I want to say something, she began, her voice shaking slightly. What Drake and Ethan did today, that was the direct result of the culture I created at this school. A culture where power meant everything, where hurting people was seen as strength. She paused, gathering herself. I've been working with counselors since everything happened, and I'm starting to understand the damage I caused. The auditorium was silent as Victoria continued. This morning, Olivia Chen saved me from people who used to be my friends, people I taught to be cruel. She had every reason to walk away, to let them take whatever revenge they wanted. But she didn't, because she's stronger than I ever was. Not through intimidation or manipulation, but through actual courage. Olivia felt Maya squeeze her hand as Victoria turned to face her directly. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I want to help make things right. That's why I'm volunteering to help Detective Chen with his anti-bullying program, sharing my experience as a warning to others. Principal Hammond retook the podium, outlining the new security measures and support systems being put in place. But the real changes were already happening among the students themselves. After the assembly, Alex caught up with Olivia in the hallway. Your dad mentioned something about a youth leadership program at the police department. Think he'd let me help out? You'd give up your free time to work with troubled kids? Olivia asked, smiling. Well, he grinned, I learned from watching you that sometimes the best way to fight back is to help others stand up for themselves. Maya and Zara joined them, excitement evident in their faces. Did you hear? Maya bubbled. They're starting a peer counseling group and they want us to help run it. Us? Olivia raised an eyebrow. Who better? Zara pointed out. We've seen how bullying works from the inside. We can help other students recognize the signs and stand up to it. As they discussed plans for the new programs, Victoria approached their group hesitantly. The hallway grew quiet, students watching to see what would happen. I've been thinking, Victoria said softly, about what you said regarding evidence and documentation. I kept records of everything, every scheme, every person involved, every parent who helped cover things up. It's all encrypted on my laptop. She took a deep breath. I want to turn it all over to your father. Let him use it to help other schools identify and stop abuse of power. Olivia studied her former tormentor carefully. That could implicate a lot of powerful people. Your father's friends, business associates. I know, Victoria nodded. But maybe it's time the right people had some power for a change. Later that afternoon, Detective Chen sat in his office reviewing Victoria's files with the FBI cybercrime unit. The evidence she'd provided went beyond Westbrook, revealing a network of privilege and corruption that spanned several prestigious schools. You've started something big here, he told Olivia as they drove home. These cases could help change how schools handle bullying across the country. We started something, Olivia corrected him. I just did what you taught me. Stand up for what's right, gather evidence, and trust in justice. Her father smiled. Justice and courage. You showed both today. Though maybe next time, try to catch the bad guys without dropping from the ceiling. Olivia laughed. No promises. After all, I'm my father's daughter. The changes at Westbrook Academy continued to ripple outward. The arrest of Drake and Ethan, combined with Victoria's cooperation, had cracked open a door that couldn't be closed. Students who had once lived in fear began to find their voices, and those who had wielded power through cruelty found themselves facing a new world, one where accountability and integrity mattered more than social status or family connections. 1 month after the dramatic events that transformed Westbrook Academy, the school held a special evening event to launch its new Student Safety and Leadership Initiative. The same auditorium that had once witnessed Victoria Sterling's confession was now filled with students, parents, and educators from schools across the district, all eager to learn from Westbrook's transformation. Detective Chen stood at the podium, his badge glinting under the lights as he addressed the crowd. Real change, he began, doesn't come from simply stopping bullies. It comes from transforming the culture that allows them to thrive. He gestured to the student panel seated behind him, where Olivia, Maya, Zara, and Alex sat alongside several other students, including, surprisingly, Victoria Sterling. The atmosphere at Westbrook had shifted dramatically. The hierarchical lunch tables were gone, replaced by open seating where students mixed freely. The peer counseling program, led by Olivia and her friends, had become a model for other schools. Even more surprisingly, Victoria had become one of its most dedicated members, sharing her story as a cautionary tale while working to make amends. Drake and Ethan's legal troubles had extended far beyond school discipline. The FBI's investigation, sparked by their attempted revenge, had uncovered a network of corruption involving several prominent families. Detective Chen's case had grown into a multi-jurisdictional investigation, with several other schools now under scrutiny for similar patterns of privileged abuse. Today, Olivia addressed the audience, standing confident at the podium. We're not just celebrating the end of bullying at one school. We're launching a movement. She looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. What happened here proved that no one is untouchable when we stand together against abuse of power. After the presentation, families mingled in the reception area. Maya and Zara were demonstrating their new anti-bullying app, developed with help from the tech department. Alex was discussing the youth leadership program with a group of interested students from other schools. Victoria approached Olivia. looking more genuine in her simple sweater and jeans than she ever had in designer clothes. "Your father's team finished interviewing my dad today," she said quietly. "He's agreed to testify about the corporate corruption in exchange for leniency." Olivia nodded, remembering how her own father had taught her about justice versus revenge. Sometimes people need a wake-up call to do the right thing. "I got mine," Victoria admitted, glancing around at the transformed school. "Thanks to you." "Well, thanks to you and your dad. He's helping my mom and me start over. Witness protection program once the trials begin." "Fresh start," Olivia said. "Make it count." Detective Chen joined them, placing a proud hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Ready to head home, kiddo? It's been a long day." As they walked to the car, they passed the cafeteria, the scene where everything had changed. Through the windows, they could see the new mural the art club had painted. "Strength through unity," in bold letters, surrounded by diverse hands joined together. "You know," Detective Chen said as they drove home, "when we first moved here, I was worried about you adjusting to another new school. Instead, you changed the school itself." Olivia smiled, watching the lights of their new hometown pass by. "We changed it, Dad. You always taught me that one person standing up can inspire others to do the same." At home, Olivia found a text from Maya sharing a video that had gone viral. Students from schools across the country reacting to Westbrook's story, sharing their own experiences and pledging to create change in their communities. The final image was powerful. Westbrook Academy, once a fortress of privilege and fear, had become a beacon of hope. The girl who had arrived clutching her worn backpack, feeling like an outsider, had not only found her place but had helped create a new kind of community, one where strength came from character rather than intimidation, and where even former bullies could find redemption through genuine change. Detective Chen smiled as he watched his daughter responding to messages from students seeking advice about starting their own anti-bullying programs. The bullies had indeed messed with the wrong girl, but in doing so, they had inadvertently sparked a transformation that would impact schools and students far beyond the walls of Westbrook Academy. As Olivia finally headed to bed, she passed by her father's study where he was reviewing case files. "Hey, Dad." She paused in the doorway. "Thanks for teaching me to stand up for what's right." "No," he replied, his eyes shining with pride. "Thank you for showing everyone else how to do the same."